That's your subconscious. The reason the subconscious is so incredibly powerful is because it's constantly working. It never stops, even when you're asleep, right? So I want people to understand that literally the core of who you are and the core of how you think is your subconscious. And that's why we're constantly, we have like this common thread going on in this podcast about what you let in is your fault, right?
Right. And so an intentional individual, whether it's, you're working on improving your health or your relationship with your wife or your kids, or work on your business, requires full attention. And to have full intention, you must be intentional to get there. So that's shutting off your devices, turning off notifications, whatever the case may be, that allows you to get in flow state. And my story is my own, just like
Exactly.
your story is your own.
Yeah.
So in the book, I write about my experiences, some of the similar stories that you hear today, and other ones as well too. I've read a lot of personal growth books, incredible books. I've sat in programs with every major person you can think of. I've coached with some of these people, and I just meditated on it. And 3 words came up, right? Empowerment, passion, and prosperity. And if I would have to define my life, sorry, it turned into power, but right, empowering dreams, right? Igniting passion and accelerating prosperity in every area of your life, business, family, health, finances.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Dr. Jay LaGuardia, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about your book that you've written. We want to talk about your podcast, Triple P Life, right? And we also want to talk about your money mastermind that you're doing. So thanks again for being here, bud.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting me. I'm excited to be here and hopefully share and impart a little bit of wisdom from my own life experiences, and people can learn and perhaps maybe can use those lessons to help themselves.
That's what we're all about, buddy. That's what we're all about. So tell us where you were born.
I was born in Passaic, New Jersey, which is a little town right outside of New York City. Born and raised there. I lived in New Jersey for the first 21 years of my life. But, we talk about our story and how we get to where we're at. Mm-hmm. And in life, there are those seminal moments, right, where life can go one way, life can go another way. But when you're a kid, life happens to you, not so much for you, in a sense that you're not so much the director of your life, as there are so many influential people like parents and stuff that have a significant impact in your life. And I was no different. When my mother got pregnant with me, I was the fourth of 4 children. And my father took off. He abandoned my mother, he abandoned me. And I didn't really get a chance to meet him until I was, that I recall, somewhere around 5 or 6. So he didn't really have any influence or impact on my life. But, as I started going to school and I see other kids have dads and dads were involved in their life, I'm like, how come my dad isn't around? Like, why isn't he a part of my life? And you start to evolve this story and you hear bits and pieces from your parents and relatives, or from your mother and relatives and grandparents. And, I started to come to this belief that my father left me because A, didn't love me, or didn't love my mother, or I wasn't worthy, or I didn't deserve his attention. And, that would devastate any child, let alone a son, right? And so as life goes on, through my adolescence and teen years, I developed, this real sense of anger, incredibly volatile. I would get in fights on those stupidest things. I mean, I've done some crazy, stupid things because of my anger. It's got me in a lot of trouble. It's hurt a lot of people. And I met a girl in my dreams in college. So left New Jersey, went to Marietta, Georgia, where I did my undergrad and grad work. And I met this girl from Wisconsin and fell in love. And we were probably dating about 4 or 5 months, and we were planning on getting married. And as things go, she got pregnant, and unplanned. But you do what you got to do, right? We're in love, and we're planning on getting married, so we're gonna have a baby. And so I came home one night. I was out with a couple of buddies. We were playing ball, and I came home. It was 11:30, and every light in the apartment was on, which is very antithetical to my wife because she's usually asleep by 9:30, 10, even back then. And I walked into the bedroom. She's crying absolutely hysterically. I've never seen someone cry so bad. That kind of cry where you anticipate someone close, maybe one of her parents had passed away suddenly.
Yeah.
And I asked her, I said, what's going on, babe? What's happening? And she couldn't even speak. She just pointed over to the counter. And I didn't really understand what she was doing, but I kind of walked over there and I saw this vial on the counter, and it was purple. And I'd never seen an EPT test before, let alone what purple meant. And so I had had a few libations, so I stopped and I looked and read the box and like, oh, you're pregnant. And I said to her, I said, it's okay. We'll make it work. We're in school. We don't have any money. We're barely passing by. Anyway, once she finally got to the moment where she could speak out a few words, she goes, no, you don't understand. I was going to break up with you tomorrow.
Oh my goodness.
That floored me.
Wow.
That floored me. And I said, why? She goes, I love you more than anyone I've ever loved in my life. She goes, but I can't take your anger. She goes, it crushes me, and I'm afraid what it's going to do to you and do to us. And that was one of those moments where I said, okay, I knew it, right? Innately, I knew that I had a problem. But, when you're 20 something years old, you feel like you can overcome anything, and it's always other people. They're the issue, not me. And so I was faced losing her, losing my future baby. And I said to her, I said, if I get help, will you give me a second chance? And she said yes. And it wasn't roses and wine after that. It was a lot of hard work. But what I came to realize, all my anger was from this unresolved emotion that I never really faced and addressed, from this hurt that I carried from my childhood, like so many people do, right?
Yeah.
And I sought counseling, and that helped a little bit, not so much. In some respects, the counselors I went made it worse. And then, as things would have it, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. I had just started in business. We had graduated out of school, and a buddy turned me on to this business coach. And another seminal moment in life, and everything was going wrong, Mike. My business was failing. We had bought a 7-figure business. I was only out of school a couple of years. People were backing me financially, so I had a lot of pressure. My wife was my business partner, and the business was struggling. And I couldn't keep employees. I couldn't empower them. Couldn't generate the kind of revenue necessary to make the business successful. And he said to me, my buddy says to me, he goes, why don't you talk to this business coach? I said, business coach? I could barely afford to eat now. And he goes, trust me, just give him a call. And so we got on the phone. He said, well, tell me what's going on in your life. And for the next 6-7 minutes, I proceeded to tell him everything that was going wrong outside of me. Everything was going wrong in my marriage, with my employees, with my doctors, with the patients, with the insurance companies. And at the end of just kind of spewing all over him, it was a really cathartic experience. And I just felt this sense of release. But there was dead silence on the other side of the line, Mike. And I said, hello, are you still there? And he goes, after a couple more seconds of silence, he goes, Jay, I know what your problem is. I said, great. In my mind, I'm thinking, finally, someone's going to tell me what I need to do, D-O. And he said, your business, your life, and your marriage is waiting for a leader to show up. and it's not you. And so another seminal moment.
Whoa.
Someone will call me. Yeah. Someone call me out of my crap.
Oh
right?
my goodness gracious.
It was the first time in my life I looked inside and I admitted to myself, he's 100% correct. Everything that existed in my life right now, good or bad, is a result of me.
How did that feel?
Now, it was a kick to the gut.
Yeah.
But it also was empowering. It was empowering because I knew if I took ownership, right, with the right guidance, leadership, mentoring, coaching,
yeah,
and maybe some good luck, I had a chance to turn it all around.
Wow.
So he said to me, he goes, I'm not even going to focus on your business right now, Jay, because we need to get you right.
Yeah.
And so we started to work on personal development, started working on it was the interesting thing, Mike. He saw himself in me. Very similar. He grew up as an angry kid. He had a similar circumstance. So he felt this affinity for me.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, perfect time, perfect person. And so we really started to go in, and I started to figure out. So he got me meditating. He goes, you got to clear your mind to figure out what is fueling your anger. He goes, I can't tell you. That a psychologist can't tell you. Xanax can't tell you. An antidepressant can't tell you.
Yeah, Prozac's not going to do it, right?
Prozac's not going to tell you. All it's going to do is keep you where you're already at.
Well, it's going to mask it, right? It's going to cover it up, and then you're not going to be able to think straight anyway.
100%. And then it's just going to get worse, compile itself, and eventually you're going to crash and burn. And I was almost burning, right? Yeah. So did a lot of work, a lot of introspective work, and I came to this realization. And another couple of experiences, that kind of brought that out, but I did. And then the first thing that I did was, I'll never forget this. One night, my wife went to sleep. We put the kids to sleep, and I was just sitting up. I was watching a movie. Remember, it was the beginning of the baseball season. Big baseball fan. They had Field of Dreams on. Mm-hmm. And that closing scene where Kevin Costner and Ray Liotta, he says, "Dad, you want to have a catch?" Mm-hmm. That was it. I lost it. Mm-hmm. And all that anger and frustration and resentment that I had, it just flew out. And I just started to write. I started to journal. And I wrote like 8 pages of notes of everything that I felt, everything that I went through, all the pain that he put me through, how angry I was. And it was about 3:30 a.m. My wife gets up, comes out in the kitchen. She's like, I was wondering where you were. She came to the kitchen. Tim, what are you doing? And I'm like, I can't even talk. I'm an emotional wreck.
Yeah.
And I hand this letter to her, and she's wiping the sleep out of her eyes. She goes, what is this? I said, it's a letter to my dad.
Wow.
And she goes, you want to read it? And I said, yeah. So she read it. She finished. She put it down, and she looked at me. Her jaw was hanging open. And she goes, are you going to send that to him? And I said, yeah, tomorrow. She goes, will you do me a favor? And I said, what? She goes, I want you to read this every day for the next 3 days. And at the end of the 3rd day, if you still feel like you need to send this to him, I'll mail it myself.
Interesting.
So I did. She's always been, that guiding light, that intuitive being, always knew what to say.
I hate to ask this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I hate to ask this. No. Is this the one that was going to leave you, but she didn't leave you?
Right.
Okay, so she didn't leave you.
Never left me.
No. Okay, because I didn't ask that part, and I'm like, okay, right. I want to make sure that this is the same girl, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So You read it for 3 days. What happens?
So at the end of the 3rd day, when I read the letter, something incredible happened. When I read it, there was no longer the emotion tied to it there was the night that I wrote it.
Yeah.
Like, I got everything out. I put it on paper and I organized it.
Yeah.
And I released it. So that emotion no longer held power over me.
Yeah.
Now, I can't tell you, Mike, that I went from, this bombastic, angry person to the most perfect person in the world. I still get angry. It's a normal human emotion.
Sure.
but through learning and understanding what the triggers are and how to cope in a positive manner, it doesn't impact my life in a negative way that it did previously.
Right.
So I never sent it. And funny thing, my father and I developed a relationship there afterwards, and I'm glad that I didn't send it, because that would have prevented us from ever having any kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And so through the years, I've kind of shared with him a couple of those notes, but never the whole letter that I shared.
Okay, so that's what I was dying to know. So you shared with him some of it, but not all of it?
Correct.
Okay. So do you mind if we go back a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, man. Because I'm dying to know, and I apologize. You heard of curiosity killing the cat, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm past my 9 lives, dude. So, all right. So let's go back for just a second, if it's okay. So growing up in that town is Passaic, you said, right? New Jersey?
I was born there. I was raised in Lyndhurst, which is not far from there, right by Giant Stadium.
Gotcha. Okay. So what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
The culture.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it until I left.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you missed it, right?
I missed it. And I you don't know until you leave what you had.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. I mean, really tight Italian family, the culture of the food and the different ethnic backgrounds. And then I moved to Atlanta, lived there 4 years, and there was some of that. But then I came to the Midwest, and there's none of that.
At all, right? Okay.
At all.
That's right. So who was the most...
And they're great people, by the way. Midwesterners are great people.
No, we're not saying anything negative about the Midwest. It's just something you missed, right? It's just not... Yeah, right? It's a different culture. It's just a different culture.
100%.
Right?
100%.
So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
My brother.
Okay. Why?
My brother was 7.5 years older than me. Here's another crazy thing. He and I never lived a day in our life in the same house together.
Really?
Well, that's not true. When I was 2.5, my father took him, but I don't ever remember leaving him and I living together. So he took him, and then they lived, back in the day on the East Coast, there were multifamily homes. So grandparents were on the bottom, you'd have one kid in the family on the next level, another kid in the family. That's just the way it was, right?
Yeah.
And so they lived 2.5 miles from, where I was. Mm-hmm. And so he went to live there with my grandmother and my father. So he was the most influential because I always wanted to be like him.
Yeah.
Right. So he was older. I saw no faults. He was perfect.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be with him. Yeah. Right. I wanted to be with my brother. But so early on, by far, my brother was the most influential for sure.
That's cool. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
History.
What was it about history that made it your favorite?
It wasn't until I had an American history teacher. His name was Mr. Bishop. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny. Up to that point, if you were like me, with history was just dates and names, and you had to remember dates and names, and there was no context to it. They would kind of tell you the story about it. But American history, through that entire year, he told a story. Mm-hmm. And it was the most compelling story. It was the American Revolution. It was the most compelling story I'd ever heard.
Brought it to life.
It was so fascinating. It brought it to life. It was.
Yeah.
I didn't have to remember dates and names because I just remembered the story and the characters in the story. Mm-hmm. Right? He was such a great teacher, and he made me fall into love with history, all types of history. So I would say, that and science for sure.
Shout out to Mr. Bishop. Okay. So did you have a favorite sport in high school?
Yeah, baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played baseball.
What position?
I had a chance to get I pitched and played third base.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I played third too. Good pitch.
Yeah,
Didn't
yeah.
pitch.
I had a chance to get. You could pitch, huh?
No, didn't pitch.
I had a chance to get drafted, and I knew that wasn't going anywhere. So actually, the Philadelphia Phillies came over because we was in New Jersey, and they were scouting a couple of guys, and they say, "Hey, we're interested." And I'm like, "I'm not going anywhere." Even then, I realized I wasn't going to play pro ball. It sounded awesome, but I knew that wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah. That's cool. So you make a decision after high school to go to college in Marietta, Georgia. What college was it and why?
Okay. So a little context there. Graduated high school, and I started undergrad work. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon because I wanted to help fellow athletes.
Yeah.
And so I was in college. I played ball at Glassboro State. It's in a small school in central New Jersey. And I got her playing football. And my mother said to me, she said, I had a concussion, hurt my neck. And the trainers were working on me, but with not a lot of success. And my mother said, "Why don't you go see my chiropractor?" And I'm like, chiropractor, what the hell is that? Never heard of that before. And I had nothing to lose. I wanted to get back on the field.
Sure.
So I went in and got checked out. It was the coolest experience. It was this doc and his wife. She ran the practice. People were happy. They were having fun. There was music playing. Like, this is like no other doctor experience I've had before, right?
Yeah. On purpose, right?
On purpose, exactly. Yeah. So I went in and he did his thing and I felt great. And by that weekend, I was playing ball again. So fast forward a couple of months, I'm coming out of a biochem lab one night, and next door was a lecture hall. And I looked in and I see the chiropractor in there. He had a spine in his hand and he was giving some sort of lecture. And I said to myself, I'm going to go sit down and thank him for helping me to get back on the field. I don't think I've ever thanked him. So I went in and politely sat down and let him finish his talk. And he told the story of chiropractic, what it is, how it helps people, how it improves overall well-being and healing and so on and so forth. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So I went home. I told my mother, I said, I'm not going to be an orthopedic surgeon anymore. I'm going to be a chiropractor. That didn't go over well.
Yeah, like a lead balloon, right?
Like a lead balloon. So I finished up my pre-med requirements for chiropractic school. Then I went to Marietta, Georgia, Life University. Yeah. And that's where I met my future wife.
Gotcha. So you meet your future wife. She ends up pregnant the day before she's going to break up with you. How did you, I'm dying to know, and I know my listeners are, how did you talk her into staying?
Begged, pleaded.
I was all the pride went out the window.
Oh, absolutely. I was literally on my knees. Yeah. I was crying with her.
Yeah.
Right? Because I loved her that much. I love her that much, and I knew that I would be devastated. Mike, one of the interesting things, even as a young man, I knew one of my highest values and priorities in life was to be a dad and have a family.
Yeah.
That was taken away from me.
Yeah.
And so here I was, presented the opportunity to do the thing that I always wanted, and I almost lost it right from the beginning.
No kidding. No kidding.
Right?
Yeah.
It was such a major wake-up call. And I always thank God for giving that clarity that early in life.
Okay. So you at some point decide to get into business for yourself. You took over, you said, a 7-figure business, right?
Yes.
And you end up talking with this business coach. Okay. You're having a tough time. Your business is having a tough time. You're questioning your own confidence and your own competence, right? You're in a really tough spot. And this business coach comes along and sort of rocks your world with the truth that he delivers. Okay. What was it that you did first, second, and third after he delivered that? In other words, how did you get yourself to where you are today? How did you start this? Because this has been a journey, right? This has been how many years now?
Oh, yeah. 35.
Yeah. So you had to start that journey. And one of the things that I want you to address, if it's okay, is how what you experienced in your childhood affected you with regard to like the anger and the guilt and all of the sort of issues, if you will, that, because I don't think people quite understand this. Like, did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. I'm in the middle right now of working with a kid that's 14 years old. Okay. He lost his dad 3 months ago suddenly, and he's really going through it. Like, he's going through a really, really tough time. Nobody's been able to reach him, and I was able to reach him. And so now I'm working with him to help him sort of put his life back together. Okay. And I'm actually writing a book on the power of questions. And a big part of it is parenting. A big part of it is reaching children, especially children that have had these sort of traumas in the past. So can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah. I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but the brain is an incredible thing. From the age of 3 to the age of 9, up to 12, but 9 primarily, our subconscious mind is being developed. And it's downloading billions of bits of information every single day.
Yeah.
It's being impacted by the most influential people in our life. It could be mom or dad. It could be a teacher or a coach. It could be social media now, television, culture. So we're getting these thousands of inputs, which begins to form our belief system.
Right.
Now, our belief system doesn't necessarily mean it's based in fact, but these are beliefs that we accept as truth. One of the things you and I will probably touch on in a little bit here is our money story, right? When people grow up in an environment of scarcity where they're told that, you know what, we can't afford that, or money doesn't grow on trees, or that's for rich people, you're downloading a belief system in the subconscious mind of these children. Now, fast forward into teen years and adult years. These belief systems don't go anywhere unless they're consciously challenged and addressed and be made aware of. Sometimes we need someone outside ourselves to show us, or put the mirror up in front of us to show us these belief systems that we have. So to your question, the first thing that I did was I asked him, I said, will you work with me? And he said, yes. And I said to him, and I thanked him for it. And I said to him, I said, thank you. The second thing I did, I said, thank you for calling me out of my shit. I don't know if I can say that, but you called me out of my shit. And it's the first time anyone has ever held me accountable in my life, because I was so angry. No one wanted to confront me, because you can't out anger my anger, or you couldn't, right? You can't out anger it.
But you're a ticking time bomb, right? You're like smoldering under the surface, and people are scared to death to break that surface, right? They're scared to death of how you're going to react to it.
100%.
And for you, it's a defense mechanism, right? You're as a person who's hurting inside, and this is the thing I want people to understand. When you come from the type of environment you came from, there's a lot of hurt in there. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of all kinds of stuff in you, right? And what's happening is that's fueling this sort of anger and this massive intensity. And that anger and that massive intensity is your way of protecting yourself from somebody getting in, right? I want people to understand this, because this is one of those things that people don't get, right? And this guy had no compunction about hitting you smack in the face with what was really going on in your life. And you're like, whoa, right? All of a sudden it's like, somebody finally gets me. Somebody finally understands what it is that I'm going through. I mean, that had to have been cathartic as all get out.
It was. Mike, we've all heard the story, right? How do you address a bully?
Yeah.
You punch him in the face.
Right.
Right. literally or figuratively, but you got to stand up to that bully, because until you do, they won't respect you.
Yeah.
And so in this situation, you're 100%. I was the wounded kid.
Yeah.
I was hurting, and I never let go of it. And basically, he stepped into that mentorship, leadership, father role in some respects. And he called me out of my shit like any other dad would have called a 12 or a 14 or a 16-year-old son or daughter out, for acting in a manner that's, just not okay.
Yeah.
So I thanked him for doing that. And then the third thing was, he said to me, he goes, the only way this works is if you let go of this need to be the guy and start embracing humility. See, because you're not going to find your true essence in your arrogance or your ego. You're going to find it in your humility.
Wow.
And that's what I did.
Wow.
And it was right. It was beautiful.
Well, I love this guy, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so cool. That is so cool. And I'm so glad that happened, because then it turned everything around, right? Not immediately, but it turned everything around. So you started, I'm guessing, you started on this path of recovery. So one of the things, so talk about the changes that you made.
So the first thing that we did was, I started to work on some of these success habits that I write in my book. The first one, another compelling story, but it's so true. I know some of your listeners are going, there's no way these stories are true, but I'm telling you they're true, right? And I've always felt that God's hand has always been at work in my life, and I think in everyone's life. The question is, are we aware? Do we see it? During that time, what I didn't tell you was I was also experiencing heavy depression. And I thought it was familiar. My mother dealt with a lot of depression. And I'm not going to get into controversy whether it is or isn't. I have my own opinions on that. Maybe we can have a conversation later date about that. But I was experiencing depression. I thought it was hereditary. My mom had it, but it wasn't. It was my mindset, my belief system, and the fear of losing it all again. Because even at that point, Mike, again, my wife was my business partner. The business was failing. We had one child, one on the way. And again, everything was at stake.
Yeah.
Everything was at stake. And the pressure was so great that I was crumbling. I was having panic attacks, anxiety attacks. And so, yeah, it was all on my shoulders.
It was all right here, baby. And it felt like the way of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't breathe. I mean, sometimes literally couldn't breathe. And so on a Tuesday, my wife and I had a day off together. We would do our business stuff in the morning. In the afternoon, we'd spend time with our daughter. And she says, come on, let's get out of the house. Let's go to a bookstore. And because one of my favorite rituals was reading stories to my kids before they go to bed. And I said, great idea, let's go. So we walk, tells you how old it was. We walked into a Borders bookstore, and Mike, as if there was a guide on my shoulder, literally compelled me to go to the back of this bookstore, to a portion of the store I'd never been previously, to an aisle I'd never walked down, looking at the bottom shelf. And on that bottom shelf was a cassette tape. Again, I'm aging myself. It was a meditation cassette from Deepak Chopra, right? Yeah. I forget the actual subtitle, but it was a meditation for Deepak Chopra. And I went and I bought it. I went home, put it in, and I started to listen to it. And I remember he said, if you adopt this practice, a half hour each day, preferably in the morning, you will begin to see radical changes in your life. And that's what I did. Every morning I would get up at 6 o'clock, I'd go in my study, I'd put the cassette in, and I would meditate. And what I found is there is a real sense of joy and peace when you clear your mind, when you slow your thoughts down, when you begin to focus and visualize on who you are and what you want rather than what you have.
Right.
And there's an energy shift too. And this is not just theoretical, it's scientific. When you are in a meditative state, you're in a brainwave state called theta. Theta has the greatest influence on your subconscious mind. In fact, it's the only state of consciousness where you can literally transform your subconscious mind. Why is that important? Because it allows you to begin to rewire and change your old beliefs as you adopt and accept new beliefs, ones you choose consciously in the moment, as opposed to the ones you were fed and given as a child.
Right.
And so literally within 2 months, everyone noticed a difference. I mean, I felt it, but when you hear it from your closest friends, from your colleagues, your wife, like, man, there's a difference in you. And that was the only thing that I was doing. Then I began to add other techniques in as well too. But that really began the journey.
So you were pulled there.
Yes.
Right. So one of the things that I want people to understand is subconscious is incredibly powerful. And I'll give you an example, right? You go to sleep, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you have this idea. And the idea is something you can do to solve a problem that you've been working on for months, right? But you just happen to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you have the solution. That's your subconscious working on you, okay? You're driving down the road and you think about something, you think about somebody that you haven't thought about in months or years or decades or whatever. That's your subconscious working on you, okay? When you're trying to remember somebody's name and you can't, and you basically stop trying to remember and you go off on something else, and then all of a sudden it pops in your head, that's your subconscious. The reason the subconscious is so incredibly powerful is because it's constantly working. It never stops, even when you're asleep, right? So I want people to understand that literally the core of who you are and the core of how you think is your subconscious. And that's why we have like this common thread going on in this podcast about what you let in is your fault, right?
Absolutely.
What you let in is your fault. And as you let things in, they affect your subconscious, and your subconscious turns one way or the other. What you did that's so brilliant is you took control of it, right? You used the techniques that Chopra gave you in that cassette tape, and you changed it your way. You took control of it. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And I want people to understand how big that is.
Yeah, it's so incredible, right? Because in the world that we currently live in, there's so much noise and chaos that goes on, 24/7.
Yeah.
If you're not intentional in creating space amongst the noise will swallow you whole.
1000%.
Right? And so an intentional individual, whether it's, you're working on improving your health or your relationship with your wife or your kids, or work on your business, requires full attention. And to have full intention, you must be intentional to get there. So that's shutting off your devices, turning off notifications, whatever the case may be, that allows you to get in flow state. What is flow state? Flow state is when your highest level of productivity, where you're so focused, your energy is so laser sharp that your ability to solve problems, get things done, is tenfold better or more efficient than at any other time. In fact, you'll get 10 times more done than if you have all these other things that are competing for your consciousness, that are competing for your attention. So you can work actually less hours, get more done when you're in that state. And your subconscious mind is an energy system as well too. You just referenced it. I'll give you a perfect example of this. It's just amazing how this works. So this morning, I'm thinking of an old mentor partner, business partner of mine today. And I hadn't talked to him, and it's been about a year. It's like, you know what? I got to give Danny a call. And wouldn't you know it, 25 minutes later, Danny's on the line.
Yeah.
We were just connected.
Yeah.
We were connected. We were vibing. We were vibing together.
Yep.
He goes, hey man, I've been thinking about you. And I'm like, dude, I've been thinking about you too.
It's a real thing, man. It's a real thing.
Yes.
People think this isn't real, and it is. It is a real thing, and people live it every single day. And the biggest part of it is they have to get their subconscious in the right place. They have to get themselves in the right place. Once they're there, you're absolutely in tune to it.
I've said universal energy was the first super internet highway. It just happened to be, it was formed at the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And it's been with us forever. And it doesn't cost a subscription. All it costs is some attention and intention. Anybody can tap into it. Some people call it God consciousness. You can call whatever you want, right? But there is this, look, metaphysically, it's quantum physics. The amount of research coming out about this is crazy. That life is energy.
Yeah.
Right. And we can shift and change that energy based on our vibration, focus, and attention.
1000%. So do you know who Scott Mann is?
I don't.
Scott Mann's a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army, Green Beret, Special Forces, wrote a book called Operation Pineapple Express. It's how I met him, because I listened to his book about the Afghanistan withdrawal, and I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and he came on the podcast. And he and I have become pretty close. So he has a new book that came out last October called Nobody's Coming to Save You, a Green Beret's Guide to Getting Big SHIT Done, right? And one of the things that he talks about, if you get a chance, read that book, because in there he talks about the churn. And it's literally what you're talking about, this social media, these algorithms, all this sort of digital overdoing that we're doing, right? Is literally called, he calls it the churn. And this churn is something that we need to realize, we need to recognize, and we need to manage it. Because what it's doing is it's forcing people into tribes and forcing them, basically pitting them against each other. And so you have lifelong friends that are like defriending each other and all that kind of stuff, unfriending each other, that kind of thing, right? Over the smallest little things. And it's, people are not understanding how to have any sort of discourse anymore where they don't necessarily agree. Just because you don't agree with somebody doesn't make them evil, right? I mean, they might be, but it doesn't make them evil, is what I'm saying. So anyway, so it's something to think about, and it's definitely what you're talking about. You're right on. So let's talk about change your mind, change your life. Probably change your mind, change your destiny. It's a book that you wrote. There are people that are listening to this that are thinking about writing a book. Talk about what it took for you to decide to do that, and then also sort of the mindset, the thought process.
It said that everyone has a book in them, and I tend to agree with that. I just don't think everyone has, the gumption to write a book. It's not an easy thing, especially when you self-publish, right? Yeah. So as I've been compelled to share these success habits, because, I coach, I've been helping, people for a decade and a half now, I speak, things like that. And I see how this message begins to shift and change people. Mm-hmm. And it's not my message. I don't own it, right? A lot of it I've gotten from so many mentors, people you probably even know of, but I take it and make it my own, as they have done the same. It wasn't their message either, right? They've learned it from other people. Because it's been said there's nothing new in the universe. It's just repackaged. Everyone repackages it their own way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right? Because I'm going to resonate and connect with people who resonate with me as a person. And will. And that's beautiful. It's beautiful, right?
When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. You said that earlier today.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But my perspective is unique, right? And my story is my own, just like your story is your own.
Yeah.
So in the book, I write about my experiences, some of the similar stories that you hear today, and other ones as well too. I've read a lot of personal growth books, incredible books. I've sat in programs with every major person you can think of. I've coached with some of these people. They're all awesome. But oftentimes when I've read a book like that, I'm always left with, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Right? And I wanted to write a book where the now what is already in. So Change Your Mind, Change Your Destiny, the 8 Habits of Success, goes through each of these habits that I've implemented into my life that have been significantly are significant influences in my growth and the growth of the people and the business. That I just opened my 19th business, and these principles that I've taught my family and audiences and things like this, and so I explain each one. There's a story with each one, and then I give kind of a 4 or 5. How do you implement, put this into action starting today, kind of thing. So, it's simple, it's easy, but it's been it was an Amazon bestseller. People like it because it's just simple to follow. It's not War and Peace. It's just a how-to book.
Yeah, but it's a great story, dude. Your
Thank you.
story is compelling. No, I'm not joking. Your story is compelling because there are a lot of people out there, people that are listening to this podcast that have had trauma in the past. Okay. They had divorce in their past. They had, a parent that passed away. They had, early, right? They had all of these things happen in their lives that they then have to come to grips with. And what's beautiful about what you're writing about in your story is you've gone ahead of a lot of these people and you've figured it out, right? I mean, Deepak Chopra helped you, right? But you took it and you used it. It's one thing to buy a cassette, something entirely different.
Right.
Go to the effort that you did to change things, okay? And turn your life around. That's a big, big deal. And it's important that people understand how inspirational you are. Can you talk about Triple P Life, the podcast, real quick? What made you decide to do that? And what's your favorite thing about hosting your podcast?
So let me just follow up real quick and I'll answer your
question.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. The second habit in the book is mentorship, right? I believe from my own experience is that successful people feel compelled to to share their knowledge and wisdom with other people. Mm-hmm. And they do it most of the time out of the goodness of their heart. They don't even do it to monetize it because they know they've gotten to where they're at because of mentors in their life. And I think so often that we, right, don't think that people will help us or all you have to do is ask. And so my success is built on the shoulders of so many people who helped form. And what I believe one of my superpowers is, I'm actually wearing the Triple P Life superpower shirt, is my humility that started 35 years ago. I'm successful because I know when to shut up and listen to people smarter than me. Yeah. And not only to listen, but implement. That's the other thing. Like I'm humble enough now, like, you know what? That's a much better process or solution that I ever came up with. So why wouldn't I do it? Yeah. Why am I going to continue to head against the, against the wall? Right. So mentorship. Now the podcast, it was interesting. I retired from practice when I turned 50. I had 10 clinics at the time. We had a really successful, still do, a very successful property development company. And so I didn't need to trade time for dollars anymore. I had plenty of money coming in. I didn't need to show up at the office anymore. And don't get me wrong, I love helping patients, but I felt like there was a bigger calling where I can impact a greater percent and number of people than one-on-one. Yeah. And so I was consulting at the time. I said, I'm going to step back. I'm going to take a year off and see what comes my way. I'm a believer that if your eyes are open, the path will be revealed. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of opportunities came. I pursued one. It wasn't the right one. And then I stepped back, and during one of my meditations, I just said to myself, I said, God, what am I called to do here? Like, what's this next phase for me in life? And I just meditated on it. And 3 words came up, right? Empowerment, passion, and prosperity. And if I would have to define my life, sorry, it turned into power, but right, empowering dreams, right? Igniting passion and accelerating prosperity in every area of your life, business, family, health, finances. And if you can create abundance and finance and prosperity in all those areas, life doesn't get any better. You probably know a lot of people who are successful in business, but have a terrible relationship with their family or their children.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or they've got a crap ton of money, but they're spending a ton of it trying to regain their health. right? They've got major sickness, whatever the case.
Yeah.
So the triple key life is you can have it all. It's not a dream. It's not a hope. It's not a wish. You can have it all. And so that's how it was born. And my favorite part of what I get to do is all the incredible people I get to meet. Yeah. So my podcast is both interview and narrative, because sometimes I go 2 months and it's all on health and wellness and lifestyle, and then it's all interviews with Fortune 500 companies or best-selling authors. But all the people I get to meet, the relationships I create, and that's to me by far the best part. And of course, the audience, the feedback, I love that too.
That's awesome, buddy. So one of the themes in our podcast has been about paying it forward, right? And I believe that all of us, you, me, all of us have had mentors that have come in and out of our lives. And a lot of them were busy people, had a lot going on. They were incredibly successful. They took time that they didn't have to help somebody that they didn't necessarily know that well, but they helped us. And they had a major impact on our lives. I feel like in honor of them, we owe it to them and to ourselves to pay it forward, to find people that are younger than us or, sometimes even older, right, that need help. I believe that we need to, as contributing members of society, we need to take the time and help. And we call it paying it forward, and it's a big, big deal in this podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, man, this has been a lot of fun. You're really good at what you do, and it was a fun conversation, and I appreciate having the opportunity to come on, meet you, and have a conversation with you and your guests.
So people can get your book, Change Your Mind, Change Your Destiny, at Amazon, right? It was an Amazon bestseller. And then where can they pick up your podcast?
Any of the platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere you normally digest your podcasts.
Cool. Well, Dr. Jay LaGuardia, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been a lot of fun, man.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.